Chapter 15. Bubba kept his eyes peeled for Rachel as they walked to the coffee shop. He still couldn't place how he knew her, but the vibe she had given off the first day, combined with the fact that she appeared to be following him, made her a woman he wanted a word with. Unfortunately, she didn't materialize before they reached the shop, nor did she appear to be inside. Daphne was, though, and her face lit up when her eyes landed on Bubba. "Matt Fisher, back for more?" "Hey, Daphne." He didn't know why her uber-chipper attitude affected him the way it did. Perhaps it was just because she still looked at him the way she had in high school, like she was already picking out curtains and china patterns for their life together, and he didn't want to do anything to make her think there was a future there. "You want the same coffee you had the other day?" "You remember what I drank?" He turned slightly to catch Makenna's eye. Was she hearing this? "Of course I do." She flashed him another wide, flirtatious smile. I think I'll just have an Americano today." "With 2 sugars?" she asked, unfazed by his order change. "Yeah, how did you know that?" "That's what you drank in high school, Matt. I told you. I remember everything." Her smile was still bright, but for a moment he thought he saw her eyes flicker, change, as if for just an instant something dark crossed her mind. Right, of course. He grabbed his wallet to pay for the drink, but as she rang up the order, he noticed the bandage on her hand. "What happened to your hand, Daphne?" "Oh, this? Burned it on the coffee machine this morning," she said with a laugh. "I'm such a klutz sometimes." He did remember Daphne being klutzy occasionally in high school, except when she was cheering or performing on stage, which he always found odd. She could trip over a speck of dirt in the hallway, but when pom-poms were in her hands or lights were on her, she seemed to have the focus of a surgeon. Still, was she telling the truth? He couldn't imagine Daphne hurting anyone, but it was odd that her hand was injured the night after someone bled on a rock at a crime scene. He wondered if Felicity would have a cut, or Rachel. Shaking his head, he handed over his money and shuffled down to the end of the counter to wait for his drink. He had to stop thinking about Felicity like a suspect. She was probably completely innocent, and he was simply chasing shadows that didn't exist. As he waited for his drink and for Makenna, he scanned the room again. He felt eyes on him, and there, by the door, he saw her, Rachel, the mystery woman. His eyes widened, but before he could move, she bolted out the door. "Where are you going?" Makenna called after him as he made his way through the crowded tables to the door. "Be right back." He pushed open the door and scanned the area. To the left were the other businesses, but no sign of the woman. He turned right, but it too was void of people. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Where could she have gone? With a sigh, he returned to the shop. Makenna stood at the end of the counter with 2 drinks in her hands. "What was that about?" she asked, holding out his cup. Bubba glanced back at Daphne, who appeared engaged with a customer. She probably wasn't listening, but he didn't want to take any chances. He shook his head and whispered softly, "Not here. Come on." She followed him out of the shop and to a bench a few feet away. "You want to tell me what happened in there?" "I don't know. Maybe I'm going crazy. First there was Daphne, who still seems obsessed with me, and for a moment I thought I saw something in her eyes, something strange." He wasn't sure he could put into words the exact feeling. "Plus, did you notice her bandage?" "I did, but she said she burned it on the coffee machine." "Maybe she did, but you have to admit, the timing is odd. Then there was that woman, Rachel, but when she saw me, she ran out of the shop. When I got outside, she was nowhere to be seen." Makenna placed a hand on his arm. "First off, you aren't going crazy. This case has us all tied in knots, and this new information is a lot to process." He glanced down at her hand on his skin and then back to her eyes. The desire to kiss her burned within him again, but she'd said they had to remain professional. Easy to say, but much harder to do. How long had it been since a woman had ignited these feelings in him? But were they real, or did they simply feel real because of this crazy situation? And even if they were real, what then? He didn't plan to stay here once this case was complete. His life was back in Fire Beach. And did he think she would come back with him? Her life was obviously here. He supposed they could do a long-distance relationship, But he'd been alone for so long that he didn't want to be with someone and not be able to see her. No, kissing her would be a bad idea. He knew that, but then why did he keep thinking about it? "You're right. I don't know how you do this every day." Makenna chuckled. "Well, not every day is like this, thankfully. Most days I'm issuing traffic tickets or breaking up fights after a football game or at the hop. I don't think I'd want to do this every day. But I think you might be onto something. I do want to talk to Daphne and Rachel and Felicity," Bubba added. He still couldn't get the uncomfortable dinner out of his mind. Makenna removed her hand and Bubba immediately missed the warmth. "Tell me more about Felicity," she said, as they stood and began walking back toward the station. "I don't know her well." Bubba sighed as he thought of where to begin. "My mom and dad felt a calling to help kids after my brother and sister and I graduated from high school. But they were older, and they knew they couldn't handle small children, so they took in teenagers. Most of the kids didn't last long, because by high school, they are generally either too messed up to want a home, or they're so independent that they go off on their own as soon as they can. Felicity was different. She wanted a home. Evidently, her father had been an alcoholic and beat her and her mother when she was young. Her mother eventually turned to drugs, and her father was killed in a bar fight. She went from one foster home to another until she landed with us. She was quiet at first, and because I was older and out of the house, we weren't that close. But when Jacob and Rachel moved away, I spent more time with her. Still, something was always off. Once or twice, I brought a woman home to meet my parents, and Felicity would issue snide remarks about them under her breath. It almost felt as if she had a crush on me, but maybe she was just looking out for me. Those women didn't last, obviously. Makenna shook her head as if wanting to make sure he understood. It wouldn't be the first time a foster kid has developed a misplaced attraction for a sibling. A lot of them mistake romantic feelings for security, which is what they're really craving. Still, given where we're at, it's worth looking into. You said she just broke up with a boyfriend too? Bubba nodded. Yeah, her boyfriend Roger. She doesn't seem especially torn up about it either, which I find odd because Mom said they were together for years. Maybe we should talk to Roger. Bubba nodded. He'd like to meet the man who had dated Felicity himself, see what kind of person he was. It took a stop at Bubba's parents' house to find out who Roger was. Even in this small town, Makenna didn't know everyone's name. Roger turned out to be Roger Ellison, who ran the only bed and breakfast in town. Felicity? Why are you asking about Felicity? He asked as he placed the breakfast dishes in the sink. Makenna looked to Bubba. She wasn't sure just coming out with their suspicions would be the smartest way to handle this. Bubba, thankfully, seemed to understand and took the lead. She's my sister. I'm not sure we ever met, but I'm Matt Fisher. Roger turned to face them, his eyes wide. I thought you were dead. That's what Felicity told me. We needed people to think that, Makenna said, stepping in. I'm sure you must have heard about the recent fires. Yep, kinda hard to miss that. Roger turned back to the sink and turned on the faucet. Especially in a town of this size. Well, we had a similar string of arsons 5 years ago. Matt here was one of the victims, but he managed to get away. However, to test a theory, we let everyone believe he died. Roger shut off the water and turned back to them, leaning against the sink. I assume your theory turned out to be true? It did, until the fire started again. I asked Matt to come back to help. Makenna was having a hard time reading Roger. Was he guarded because of his feelings for Felicity, or was he hiding something? I know I've been away from Felicity for several years, but she seems off. We were hoping that maybe you could fill us in on her behavior the last few years you were together, and why it ended, Bubba said, stepping in. Roger folded his arms across his chest and sighed. I'm not sure anything I have to say will help you, but I'll try. Felicity and I met about 6 months after your death. I guess I moved to town a month or so after the fires ended, and I worked at a crisis hotline in the evenings while I was getting this place ready. Felicity was grieving and became a regular caller. It's not generally recommended to meet the people you talk to on the phone, but she begged me. I said no at first, but after about a month of phone calls, it appeared she really needed a friend, so we agreed to meet at a coffee shop. It was sort of a attraction at first meet, I guess you could say, though I think some of that was because we had shared so much over the phone.
Anyway, we started dating, and for a time everything was great. Then about a month ago, something changed. She began talking about all the people who came into the office and how she wished she could help them. I think she was reading the doctor's notes on them because she had way too much information.
Wait, Makenna interrupted him as puzzle pieces began turning in her head. Doesn't she work for a local doctor?
Yep, Dr. Bloom, the psychiatrist. She's the receptionist there. Now maybe these people were sharing while they waited for their appointment, but I don't think so. When I asked her about it, she got defensive and told me to mind my own business. It just went downhill from there, and I finally had to call it off for my own sanity.
Makenna exchanged a glance with Bubba. She didn't want to think his sister could be the arsonist, but now she had motive, odd behavior, and a troubling history. Roger caught the look and shifted his eyes from Makenna to Bubba.
Is she okay? I mean, I couldn't take the negativity, but I still care about her, you know? I know she had it rough growing up.
We're going to find out, Roger, Makenna said, putting out her hand. Thank you for your help.
He shook it, but his eyes were on Bubba. I wish I could do more.
Thank you. You've helped a lot. Makenna knew those words were hard for Bubba to say. She thanked Roger again and led the way out of the house. When the front door closed behind them, and she was confident they were out of earshot, she turned to Bubba. I think you're right. We need to question Felicity. Her list of suspects was growing, but Felicity was at the top of the list right now. His face was pale, but he nodded. She couldn't imagine how hard this must be on him. If Felicity was the arsonist, it meant not only had she murdered 5 people, but that she'd tried to kill him as well. That had to be hard to swallow.